best. It's the second time I worked with him. We came off of this play. We did a play together on Broadway, and then that was really where we got close. We got very close doing that play and became very good friends. And then it was really serendipitous, the timing, because we finished the play and we were in the midst of this really great conversation about our family and how weird our family was and our moms and our dads. And when this opportunity came up, he called me and said, "You want to do this picture with me and play my son?" And I was like, "Wow, that's weird. We're in the midst of this great conversation." And I read the script and I was like, "This is perfect. This is just one of those serendipitous things that you never really could put your finger on, when the timing is right, when a part comes your way that just sort of parallels with a good time in your life." And that's what this movie was, really. And I'm very comfortable with Al, and the guy's like my idol. I never thought I'd meet him, much less work with him and become his friend. And now I'm like text buddies with him. So I think it facilitates it. I think all that, without thinking too much about it while we were in the midst of it, it's one of those things that afterwards you go like, shit, what a weird coincidence that might. It's almost exactly like the way our relationship is. But again, that's one of those things you can't put your fingers on. And sometimes wonderful things happen precisely because of those strange coincidences. I mean, I think that happens more often than you think. And, that's certainly happened. I've been very fortunate to have things like that happen to me before. Station Agent was like that. Station Agent was like, 4 friends. Script written for 3 people specifically. It took forever to get made. And then all that time that it took forever to get made, we just got closer and closer. And we were just ready to do it when the time came. It's the first time director. He had 17 days, and we banged it out for no money. And I think that the spirit of that film, the spirit of like those people together over all those years trying to get that movie made, it sort of lent it something. It lent it a cohesion. It lent it a chemistry that you can't get just by hiring any 3 people and throwing them together. I mean, I certainly, have been doing Al my whole life, so, and I do it even more now, but, I was just always fascinated by how alive the guy is on stage and in film, and and I really got to sort of, I always suspected what I thought it might have been, and then I get to know him and I get to work with him, and I realized, the very first time I met Al was at the Tony Awards. We were both nominated for the same award, and he sat me next to him at the ceremony, and I introduced myself to him, and I asked him if he'd come and see this play that I was in. I thought he would like the play, and he said, "I'm coming." And he came, and he stayed in my dressing room for like an hour and a half after the play, just talking to me. And in that entire hour and a half, I don't think the guy talked about himself at all. He just asked me questions. He asked me about everything. He asked me about my family. He asked me about my mom, my dad, my work, what writers I liked, what theater I loved. And the guy didn't talk about himself. He just asked questions, and that to me is the epitome of Al, his curiosity. He's 75 years old, and the guy could easily just sit back and not be interested, but his almost desperate need for questioning and trying to, he's kind of tortured by like the meaning of it all. And that to me is what makes him come alive, And we talk about it, that, so many times, you see actors and you go, well, he's really good at doing that. A lot of times actors can fall in love with their work, and I just never see that in Al. All I see in Al is this guy who's just constantly on the search. And that's one thing that I spotted at a kind of young age when I wanted to be an actor, like, that guy's different from all these other actors. And I never could really put my finger on it, and then we talked about it, and now, if I emulate anything, it's just that curious nature that he has. It's really admirable to see in a guy his age. It was the motherfucker with the hat. I did not see him in the audience. I didn't know he was coming that night. He just showed up in my dressing room afterwards.
Wow.
And he loved the play. And no, I didn't know he was in the audience. Yeah. Well, Al and Dan Fogelman really worked a long time together on this. They collaborated for a few years, I think, on this. And so that script was really, really ready. And we had talked about how much we thought Dan had a real talent for writing very realistic dialogue. And there are sort of totems in the movie that I think in another film could make you like cringe. But this didn't have this for me, Same thing with Same thing with like the coincidence, just, it could be the kind of movie that the coincidences are too unbelievable. But again, when I read the script, what I saw was like on the surface the story about this guy, Al's character, sort of living his life one way and then making this choice to sort of step away from this comfortable life that he has. But what I also saw that wasn't so obvious in the script was that that's the same journey that this character, my character, goes on. And it's sort of ironic that like they've never met each other, but they go on the same sort of journey together. They're in the same predicament. And I really like that. I like that without knowing each other, they were both going through the same crisis. And I thought, well, that really gives a good opportunity to two good actors to not hit the nail on the head, because in the hands of maybe somebody else, two other actors that aren't as whatever, it would become that kind of a movie, like a sort of TV movie or a Hallmarky kind of movie. And I thought that was the challenge, really, and I thought that the script supported a really good cast, but in the wrong hands, it could maybe not work out so well. And I'm not just talking about me, I mean, the Chris Plummer manager part, that in somebody else's hands could be an opportunity for an actor to be show-offy, but Christopher Plummer is just so great, and Annette Bening, those scenes between Annette and Al, I'd much rather watch that movie any day over whoever the hottest new young actors are falling for each other. I just think they're so good in those scenes, and they're so delightful, and again, you don't get to see people kind of flirting with each other quite like that, So I think the combination of the script, being sort of straightforward enough, and yet open enough to be able to be filled by really good actors, I thought that the combination in the end really came off. It was pretty impossible to hear anything but "Hey Baby Doll," because Al was always singing it on set. Just always singing it on set. Always, He would just say the first word, and then he had gotten into this thing where like the crew would finish the song for him. So it was just impossible to get that song out of my head. Al would always say about the little girl, Giselle, he said it all the time, and I'm not sure he's wrong. She'd act and do a take, and he'd turn to me and he'd go, "I think that's the best actor I've ever worked with in my life." He's like, "She's amazing." And it wasn't by accident. Like, you'd improvise with her, and she would react. She would go right back with you. She was improvising all the time. I think she's 6 years old. She was amazing. And then Jen Garner, I didn't know her before this, and was a fan of hers. And we emailed with each other, and then we really connected over our children. She's got 3 kids, and I've got a son. And if you know anything about Jen, you know that she's like a super mother. She's just this fiercely protective mother of the family, and there's a parallel between the character and her, I think, in that sense. But I think her part is really hard in the sense that it's one thing to play somebody who's a wife and a mom who's protective of her family, okay, but she also through all that, she's also the bridge between the father and the son, which I think is a hard thing to pull off. And she does a really, really just a wonderful job of it. But I think that connection with her family and the importance of the family, I think, was something that she very naturally brought to it. And her work is just so natural and honest and truthful. And it was a pretty fun set, that little girl and Al. And, Al's kids were, I think, 12 at the time, and so he was talking about his kids. I was talking about my kids. She was, it was just kids around, and it made for a fun set. I haven't, but I've had the dreams. I have a lot of dreams like that, particularly when I'm doing a play. I generally have the dream that I'm locked out of the theater. I'm in a stairwell. I can't get in. I can hear them giving me my cue. And they keep saying the cue over and over and over, and I'm supposed to come in with the next line. And so I have that dream, but I've never had it on stage. Not gonna lie. I've had really, really nice experiences of meeting people who've said really great things to me that I never dreamed would say great things like that to me. And I've gotten letters from Al that I'll treasure forever. So I've had that already. I suppose if like Springsteen wrote me and was like, "Hey man, the last 3 albums I wrote were inspired by you and your work." I would like that. Sure. Well, I'm thrilled because I'm in that lawsuit. Yeah, I mean, I think the movie's saying that in a sense, you know, and I think it's a pretty decent lesson. I mean, you look, you know, I had a kid when I was 24 years old, and that just changed my whole attitude about what I really wanted out of life. I thought before I had my kid that, like, it was just about my work, and then I had this person, and he became the most important thing in my life, and everything else just fell into place. I don't know that happens for everybody, but that's how it happened for me, and so I think that's a pretty good thing to take away from the movie. For me, you know, that very last scene is about you know, for this character, for the Tom character, of him just sort of just taking a step through the door. You know, I like that the movie doesn't end with like a neat bow wrapped around it. Like, what's important is that Tom touches him, and I think that for me was, I really love that, because it's just him taking a step towards the door, and that to me was realistic and like way more real life than, you know, those two guys driving off into the sunset and going on a road trip. And so I like that. That to me was, you know, because I do think that, you know, I think both these guys, you know, don't know and yet do know what they want more than anything. I think Tom doesn't want his father around, and I think what he wants more than anything is to have his father there. And so sort of struggle, the conflict that he has with himself over how he lets this guy into his life is all kind of said in that very last scene. He just makes a move towards it. He's a new character. I mean, the whole story is pretty new, because the origin story of I think this has been talked about already, but Dr. Hank Pym, who's the original Ant-Man, that's Michael Douglas's character, and so Paul's character is sort of the protege, you know, and so the whole story is really new. Yeah, sure. I mean, at least I think that's true, because nobody ever came up to me and, you know, hey, you need to dye your hair red or something. But yeah, no, that was a really cool experience, because as big as that movie is, and as really as big a production as that was, the actual work and the scenes were really fun. It felt like we were on an indie film. Rudd's one of my oldest friends, so most of our scenes are together, like me and Paul and Judy Greer, and so, you know, both those actors are really good improvisers, and, you know, Adam McKay and Paul, they did a big rewrite on that script, and so the scenes themselves felt like an indie film. It really felt like a comedy that we were doing, and then of course you have those big scenes. You know, I spent so much time in front of a blue screen, and that was just a trip for me. You know, I'm not used to that kind of thing, but it was a really good combination of, you know, of bringing a real sort of off the cuff sensibility to a big, huge action movie. That was really fun, and I think that probably happened because Guardians of the Galaxy was such a success. You know, so it didn't feel like I was working on a really serious superhero movie. You know, it didn't feel like Thor or something. And then Peyton Reed, who you know, comes from comedy world, and, you know, has, you know, been with UCB forever, and, you know, so he really encouraged the improvising, and, you know, Michael Pena is really great at that, and he's really funny, and yeah, they just got the right people. So when I looked around and saw who I was surrounded by, Corey Stoll, you know, they're like actors who I've seen for years in little movies and I really liked. Yeah, it just felt like, oh, I belong here. That's good. You know, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen anything, but it felt funny. I mean, yeah, we were, you know, it's Paul, so I think, you know, they're not hiring Paul Rudd to be, you know, the Winter Soldier or whatever that guy's name is. You know, they'll get that guy. Mm-hmm. So you know, it's this, you know, yeah, it's going to have a sense of levity to it that, again, you know, like Guardians. Guardians is a legit superhero movie, but it's a pretty funny film. Mm-hmm.